Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics to break down week 6 in the OUA. Tom, this was your anniversary weekend, the big 365, the trip around the sun with, being a happily married man. And, I want to know how you're doing, of course, and I want to know how the foundation of your marriage is, knowing that whilst you were celebrating, the vows that you and your wife shared with one another, your McMaster Marauders were simultaneously throwing their season in the toilet. Tom, how the heck are you doing?
Well, when you set it up like that, I'm just doing peachy. From the highest of highs, celebrating the love of my life and being with her for a year, to the lowest of lows and seeing the horrendous play that we've seen from McMaster here. It has just been a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm hiding it all behind a smile. How are you, Zach?
I'm fantastic. I'm out here just living my best life. We've had people, ask us to maybe cushion comments we make about teams. And I think we always go into these things saying that we're not trying to ever be mean, or we're certainly not trying to denigrate individual players. Sometimes programs can take shots, as a result of our feelings, and we've made comments about our two programs and Mac and Guelph both being losers on this weekend, kind of just playing out this year, just causing heartache for us left, right, and center, perhaps less so for me because I am dead on the inside, but little warning off the jump here, McMaster fans. This one might not be pretty for you. So let's start off as we do on our review pods, and start with a little hardware. Now, let's start on the offense side of the ball. Now, Tom, often we go to a guy who has a stellar performance against York, and there certainly is one in a such performance in the form of Jared Kasari getting 286 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns. However, despite saying that first, it's actually more of the honorable mention. And why is that?
Yeah, in a rare twist here, normally the offensive player who goes off against York has unbelievable numbers, and Jared Kasari is no exception to that. 5 touchdowns and everything that he did in that game was absolutely outstanding. But we had somebody who was somewhat similar, and just because it's somewhat similar, we're going to give it our offensive player of the week this week goes to one Anthony Miller, running back for Waterloo Warriors. 28 attempts, 229 yards, and a touchdown. He was everything to this Waterloo offense, and really was able to have his way with the Guelph run defense. So, yeah, Anthony Miller is our offensive player of the week.
Most certainly, and it was on the back of Anthony Miller and with the support of a guy that we've been super bullish on all year long in Tyson Hergot on the defensive side of the ball, racking up 3 sacks, 6 total tackles. And I think there was one TFL where I remember on the broadcast they were saying, well, technically, whether it was a boot or McCrayen, they had crossed the line of scrimmage, so it was just but it's like that was pretty much a sack. But despite the outing by one Mr. Tyson Hergot, who, once again, we've certainly been leading that bandwagon all year long, that's actually not who we're giving Defensive Player of the Week to. We're taking a bit of, poetic justice or whatever on this one. Tom, who's winning our Defensive Player of the Week?
Yeah, really wanted to give a shout out to Tyson Hergot and all the great things that he did, but unfortunately he was outshined by not just one player, but by an entire position group or entire grouping. And who might that be? Well, that would be the McMaster offense. They are our players of the week for defense. 6 total turnovers, including 4 interceptions, totaling 248 yards and 21 points the other way. McMaster offense, you are a defensive player of the week.
Yeah. It's just, well, hold on, we're gonna get to that game shortly, but yeah, that's not great. Special teams player of the week, so many great performances, and a shout out, of course, to Javoni Cunningham for the Houdini act, and shout out to Brett Hedges on the call in the Windsor Western game. But of course, when Panda is won at the buzzer, and particularly when it is one on a field goal at the 55. You can miss me with this. It was a 56-yard field goal. Honestly, take that trash somewhere else. It was a 55-yard field goal. No midfield, no nothing. It's one Campbell Fair. To boot, of course, he runs the fake punt to pick them up a first down late in that game as well. You know, he's got ice in his veins. Obviously, it's a guy who was drafted to the CFL last year. He comes back, brings that experience, that moxie. I certainly think the impact of playing in a Panda is certainly part of my narrative when we get into that game, and perhaps how that can affect players who might not have as much familiarity. That place was rocking, and he was just there, steady as a rock, doing his thing like clockwork. Tom, Campbell Fair.
Yeah, what an absolute stud this kid is. And hilariously, the second time that he's hit a game winner from 55 yards out. First time this year, and arguably in even bigger fashion and more intensity, because, and something that we'll talk about as well when we get into that game, but my God, the dream that we are looking for, that you and I are praying for, happens every year at the Panda game, where 25,000 people show up, and they're not just showing up for the first part and then leaving. They stay through the game. They've got signs. They're cheering their teams on. Like, that is the dream, folks. And to do that, to hit a 55-yard field goal to win the game in front of 25,000 people. Hell yeah, Campbell Fair. You earn every single second of this Player of the Week nod.
Yeah, and obviously we've talked about having maybe a podcast in the offseason going over some of those ideas. One of the things you also see on the broadcast is that, you know, the fans that were in the stands, they got beverages in their hands, right? It's not necessarily too big a surprise in the mix when alcohol is involved there, right? But obviously that's a bit of a complicated issue as well. But we can table that for another talk. Obviously, the other 55-yard field goal you were mentioning he hit was a game winner last year against Laurier, which of course one Taylor Elgersma thoroughly remembered. But still, shout out to Taylor Elgersma for tuning into the Panda game on his bye week and then shouting out Campbell Fair via Twitter. But that's gonna do it for our hardware. But let's get into these matchups, and we are gonna start here in Toronto, where Tom, your McMaster Marauders came in and laid an egg. Final score in this game: the U of T Blues 33, the McMaster Marauders 19. In the kind of ironic terminology that we were using in kind of giving the Mac offense defensive player or defensive unit of the week, in sticking with that imagery of the fact that they gave up 21 points, U of T gets a scoop and score, 2 pick sixes, and, you know, of course, actually, you know, we should obviously shout out one of them by one Ryan Stewart, 106 yards on the return, just absolute, just nasty. But just sticking with that idea of kind of giving U of T Mac's offense credit for that defensive performance. So Mac somehow outscored themselves. Like, Mac lost to themselves 21-19. Like, U of T could have literally done, like, let's just look at the numbers. U of T ends up getting 248 yards collective on offense, 108 on the in the air, 182 on the ground. They could have literally taken knees on offense the whole game and still ended up winning this by 2 points. Tom, this team has been nothing but up and down. They have, you know, to quote the Backstreet Boys, you know, quit playing games with Tom Sterling's heart. I think that's how the lyrics went. This must be a new low. Like, what are you feeling right now?
Well, there's a lot of frustration, honestly, and I don't think I've exactly hid that so far in this podcast here, but I want to make it pretty clear here that I'm not, like, the frustration that I have, it's not purely focused on the players. If anything, maybe it's 20%, on the other 80% coaching staff. What are we doing here with this team? It seems like now, obviously, I'm not in the rooms where they're talking about game plans and everything else, or maybe there's whatever else. I'll give them that benefit of the doubt. Every single game plan for every single team looks the exact same. It looks to be, let's spread him out. Let's try to get Keegan in situations where he can utilize his arm. He's a great arm strength, whatever, and find some receivers here. You've done that every game so far. You have one win to your name here, and we haven't seen a real drastic change one way or the other. How much are you really expecting to improve upon the game plan here if it's not changing up all that much? Now, like I said, maybe they're doing a whole bunch of other things in the pass end that I'm not seeing because I just have a sideline view and we're watching it on OUA TV. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff happening, but to the average fan, doesn't really seem like anything is, which is where I want to pull my hair out, because somehow, some way, this loss feels worse than last year's against Toronto.
Now, you mentioned them kind of going back to this well of just, trusting in Keegan's arm talent. And, I've said this for a couple pods now. There's probably a combination of a lack of trust in that run game and the offensive line's ability to maybe move some bodies and things like that, kind of playing in with that. But to your point of just the predictability that they're going to spread you out, they're going to air it out. And hey, once again, like we've seen this program with the same head coach in there. And you mentioned the Corey Grant piece of it and everything, and him kind of bringing that style of offense with him to Carleton. But I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you to know that Keegan sits atop the league in terms of attempts. Now, what I want to ask you, Tom, is as far as the second most attempts from a quarterback in the OUA and second most attempts from a quarterback who's also played in 6 games, is it over or under? Let's do some quick math. Beautiful. Here's the over-under, Tom, in terms of the second most attempts by a quarterback who's also played 6 games. Is it over under 55?
You know what? I'm going to say over.
It most certainly is. It's Evan Hillock with 167 to Keegan's 224. So that's 33 there. So that's, we're just over then. I believe that math works out to 57 there. Going back to this game, and man, oh man, obviously we've talked about the missing piece of Daniel Bossett. I swear we saw him this year. Obviously we had our kind of funny moment last week and being like, oh yeah, Silas Hubert hasn't played in any of these games. Sometimes things slip past us, right? We don't actually have too many insights into what's going on with these teams. The OUA websites don't necessarily do us all that much of a favor because you can't even get 55-man rosters anymore. But we've liked what we've seen out of Braden Kelly. At the end of the day, 15 attempts, 68 yards on the ground for him. But clearly, though, Tom, here's the thing, like as you said, 6 turnovers on the game. You can't win a game doing that. That's 21 points U of T's way from specifically the 2 pick sixes, the fumble recovery, scoop and score. You remove those. I mean, as much as we joked about that Mac beats themselves in this game by giving U of T essentially 21 points to their own 19 that they score. Obviously, when you take those 21 away, we've talked about how much we actually like the MAC defense, the part of the team that actually is supposed to take the balls away from the other team. They do their job holding U of T to 11 points when it's all said and done, you removing those 3 pick sixes. Now, obviously, it is what it is. That's all part of the game. You can't change it. But does that give you any, because obviously it's a young quarterback. There's some young pieces in here, right? We talk about the connection, the Burlington connection of, Keegan Hall and obviously Jackson Cooling. We haven't seen Priestner in here. Some of these guys on defense are kind of young, right? So from that standpoint, here's what I want to say, because there's definitely people on Twitter that, kind of in and around our mentions and stuff about this game being kind of ringing, going to the, DEFCON, whatever. I don't know how that system even works. Frankly, I don't even know what it stands for. But that this is a point where they need to start looking at changing the leadership at the top. And of course, that's people calling out Coach Steph Potasic. And I love Potasic. He's your guy as well. And I think the leadership he brings, I very much enjoy, because I think in the space that I coach in, I think I try to do something similar, as trying to, connect with the players, not necessarily be the parallel, almost say like a Greg Knox type, who's going to be a little more demonstrative, a little more demanding, to kind of be more like how Stu Lang was for us, of like, you want to play for this guy. You feel like you're letting him down. He doesn't need to yell and scream at you. He's just so giving, all these types of things. And so here's what I'm wondering about, and this isn't as much towards you, but people listening who are saying they need to completely change things. There still seem to be a lot of good pieces here, and with the accompanying them, those pieces being relatively young. And so as tough as it is with this really rough stretch of Marauder football we've had coming off of the Yates in 2019, part of me feels like, unless there's just a perfect candidate out there who can come in here, work with a crop of relatively young kids who will be getting in that kind of peak, third, fourth year kind of time where they really want to like strike while the iron is hot, I kind of feel like in some ways you need to stay the course, just because I would be worried that who would be that person who could come in that would be able to, you think about having to mesh with your players, or if you bring a new system and all those types of things. So I guess all in all, I'm asking, like, what is the move? Because I just feel like it's not as if a new coach can come in and it's complete rebuild. Like, this team should be able to win. There's great pieces here.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with you. And there's phenomenal pieces on that field. I would not be as angry and as frustrated as I am if they did not have good players. If they just didn't have good players, then that's, what, hey, it is what it is. We need to recruit better. It sucks, but blah, blah, blah. But you see it. You see it on the defense, how many phenomenal players that they have, and the defense as a whole that plays so well. I mean, like, you think about we're in the fourth quarter. We've got about call it 14 minutes left to go in the game. It's 24-17 right now for Toronto. We just I say we. Mac throws another interception, and it's returned down to the McMaster 2-yard line. 3 attempts, and Mac holds out. They stuff Toronto on the goal line 3 times to keep them out of the end zone. And then we go into the next drive, and it's a pick 6. The next drive, after holding them on the field, on the goal line, is a pick 6. And you just like it makes me, it frustrates the hell out of me. And I can only imagine how it feels for the players, because they should be so good, because they have the pieces around them. And yet this kind of thing is happening here. What I'm more so leaning towards, obviously, Coach Ptacek is a phenomenal coach. He's been a Vanier Cup winning offensive coordinator, and he's been a Vanier Cup winning head coach. Right now, as far as I can tell from all of my insiders at McMaster, he's doing both. He is the offensive coordinator and he is the head coach. I think he needs to separate it. He needs to go back to being the head coach of these McMaster Marauders and really focus in on what he was doing really, really well, which was making sure he had the right people in place here to support his team and his style that he wants to bring to the squad. Obviously, he just doesn't have an offensive coordinator right now. I think the person that they have is, I can't even remember his name, but Step Ptacek is the offensive coordinator and the head coach right now. He's running the offense and still trying to run the team in practices, and that's got to be all kinds of hectic here. I think for this team to really get good, they need to recruit like freaking crazy in a lot of key areas here and really try and get some support on this offense. And B, I think he needs to make sure that he can do one job really, really well, rather than obviously being pulled in 18 different directions with all of the demands of being an offensive coordinator and being a head coach. Now, thank God that he's got an outstanding defensive coordinator in Scott Brady, because like I said, that defense is not the problem here. And it's been the one bright spot on this entire McMaster team this entire year, but he needs to get something else. There needs to be another offensive coordinator in for him, because what he's got right now just isn't working.
Yeah, and obviously, as you said, leaning into that role as head coach, him as just kind of that culture builder, culture setter is perhaps second to none. Let's talk a little U of T though, right? Because obviously, say what you want about how Mac, beat themselves in this one. This is kind of huge for U of T. Now, first comment on this one is that this is, I think, the first game we've seen from them where it's Scott Barnett as the sole quarterback they're rolling out. And then the perhaps irony is you're still seeing Kinsale active, right? So that was clearly a function of Greg Blue Marshall not being terribly jazzed with the offensive production he was getting out of Kinsale and just giving Barnett the option to win it, which, from the result we're seeing here, he has. So one thing off the jump is that at the end of the day, as we said, the total passing production for U of T was 108 yards. And so this could be one of those misnomers where you're thinking like, hey, we got this win, Barnett's the QB, and maybe he is the QB going forward. Probably have to do a bit of a deep dive come the offseason because there's just too many incredible things to talk about right now to do a full deep dive into the quarterback situation for U of T mid-season right now. But you wonder that, like, in the grand scheme of things, could this hurt? Because we obviously saw Kinsale do some fantastic stuff last year. But where this is particularly interesting as well is that we were talking a little bit on one of our last podcasts about could a 3-5 record sneak you into the playoffs? And shout out to one of the goats on the microphones calling up games, and Adam McGuire doing the play-by-play for the Waterloo Warriors, who on Twitter shouted us out, saying that, kind of just doing some math off top of his head, he thinks 3-5 can sneak someone in. I did some rough calculations and I don't feel very strongly about that. Now, there's probably like a gajillion types of situations if you want to go through every scenario where, okay, let's go through the situation where Laurier beats Windsor, but then all these things happen. Now let's do where Windsor beats, right? You can go through all of those and work them out. I didn't go through fully in the mix, but nonetheless, I trust Adam McGuire when he says that he thinks 3-5 has a shot. And like I said, I haven't fully disproved it. So I say all that in saying that, U of T's now sitting at 1-4. They got Red and Blue Bowl, Battle of Toronto, Argo Cup coming up this Friday, right? Chalk that up as a win. They go to Western. Okay, that's a loss. Then they end their season hosting Waterloo. Now, from what we've seen from those two clubs right now, you certainly give the advantage to Waterloo. No doubt whatsoever. Is it out of the realm of possibility that they can sneak away with a win at home against Waterloo? Certainly not. And so I say all that in saying that, to U of T's credit, there's the quarterback question, I think, still lingering, but there's still, they left the door open, if even just a smidgen, for a possibility they could sneak into that 7th playoff spot this coming playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. I really think that that's not outside of the realm of possibilities here. And listen, like, yes, I've been obviously incredibly upset with everything going on with McMaster, but I really wanted to give a shout out to this Toronto team. Like, they came out, they played, they worked their tails off, and they did what they kind of needed to do. I don't know if everything that we've kind of talked about in terms of the production on certain things is where we expect this Toronto team to be, or how well we think that they're going to work into the latter part of the season here. But they could. There's a possibility. There's an outside chance that Toronto could do this. But yeah, the one thing that I am a little concerned about here, and you beautifully kind of pointed this out, Scott Barnett, I'm not 100% convinced that he is the savior here rather than Kinsale Phillip. He goes 6 for 11 on 108 yards and a touchdown, and he obviously does enough to get the job done. But I wouldn't say that that's you found your savior, if that makes sense.
No, definitely, right? And, at the end of the day, even if they sneak into the playoffs, like, they're a smart enough organization to realize that that's the function of, you steal a game here or there. You obviously have redeeming, aspects of your club. But, ultimately it comes down to what's your end goal, right? If it was just to make the playoffs, then sure, like, more power to you. You did the thing, right? Obviously, they want to beat York every year. They do it pretty consistently over the last few years, no doubt, right? You do check those boxes, but as far as the long-term growth, and last thing I'll say on this one, because I think I'm done with the commentary for this one, is actually thinking about that Waterloo at Mac game next week, which I certainly know that you aren't picking Mac in any more games, and I certainly would take Waterloo. But in the event that Mac were to beat Waterloo, then that U of T Waterloo game in week 9 becomes that much more fascinating. But that's getting, we're getting to that part of the year where all these matchups and all these possible tie break scenarios just become, a headache's worth. Any last commentary from you, Tom, on this ball game?
I'm obviously very, I'm not exactly happy with the play that I've seen from these McMaster Marauders here, and I'm very much trying to make sure I'm staying professional and trying to keep things in check. But the one thing that kind of tipped me off in terms of, am I just overthinking this? Am I the guy who's just like, okay, man, like, you care a little bit too much about this team here? My DMs have been blowing up from other McMaster alumni saying, what the hell has gone on with our team here? What is going on? What's happening? Going on to social media and posting about it pretty openly and publicly. So I feel as though I am the voice of a lot of alumni who share my same views here. But more than anything, I am a positive person more than I am a negative person. Shout out Toronto. You got it done. You got it done, and you won, and you deserve to win. So well done.
No doubt. Go Blues. Well, let's go from your alma mater giving a bit of a letdown to my alma mater giving a bit of a letdown, except in this case, it's not a function necessarily of Guelph letting anyone down per se. Well, except our picks, I guess. This might be my worst week of making OUA football picks in 5 years of doing this broadcast. Mm-hmm. But of course, this one was all about them Waterloo Warriors. Final score in this game, Waterloo 30, Guelph 23. Now, what was so amazing about this one, Tom, is that I actually had to go back to watch this after it happened. I was out to see how this game ended. So I actually knew the outcome. And so as I'm going through watching the game, you get to when is it? You're in within 4 minutes in the fourth quarter, and Guelph's up 23-14. And I'm just sitting there thinking, was social media wrong? What actually transpired? And what transpired, of course, was simultaneously one of Marshall McRae's most, go back to the verb Houdini-like maneuvers, escaping the pocket, but then unfortunately he can't hold on to it as he's taken down to give the ball back to Waterloo. Waterloo goes on a drive to score a touchdown, and then gets the ball back to give to Cole Crossett to put them ahead. And then, of course, a fumble recovery touchdown, literally in the waning seconds on the kick return following that field goal, is what kind of makes the game not just the single point victory, but the 7-point victory that it is on the scoreboard. Let's start with the commentary that, once again, shout out to Mike Aloisio, who brought to our attention, though it was something that we were thinking about for a couple weeks, about with Guelph making this change to the 3-4 defense. They're able to take out Mac, and once again, a 34 made sense against Mac, no matter what, just because, hey, dare you to run the ball on us. Against York, like we said, they could play just about any defense. They were going to win that game. This was your first challenge in terms of a team that's going to want to run the ball and who can run it effectively. So that's exactly what we saw Waterloo do. You already mentioned the numbers, but Anthony Miller goes off, 229 yards, 1 touchdown, average of 8.2, and not to be outdone, the rookie and Quentin Springer, 80 yards of his own, 6.7 on the ground. And here's where I want to pass it to you, Tom, because not that I would compare Waterloo's run game to Windsor's run game, but Guelph was in that more traditional 43 defense, that 4 defensive linemen, when Windsor ran all over them. And though you're perhaps more susceptible to getting run on in that 34 we saw last year, and really for 2 years going, how Carleton was giving up so many yards on the ground, and they were playing that 30 front. we see that play out in this game, right? Where a good running team ran the ball on them well. Is this something now? And obviously Guelph's going into their bye, so I don't think they're hitting the panic button. I think they can take this as just like, okay, hey, we need to reassess. There's certainly other things they could be panicking about, and we'll get to their quarterback question momentarily. But how do you process the things that happened as far as the Waterloo run game and Guelph's inability to slow it down in terms of both the 30 front they've been running of late, getting a really formidable running attack, and the fact that when they played a 40 front against Windsor early in the year, though against one of the best running attacks, they also gave up big yards?
Yeah, I think that the biggest factor in running a 3-4 and being successful is, more than anything, in my opinion, that 30 front, you need to have the right bodies in place. Obviously, that's always the case with any defense, but when you're in a 40 front, I feel like you can get away with a lot more because you've got another body on the line of scrimmage. You've got 3 in the back, and the linebackers, for the most part, have a much better opportunity to be untouched to make a play rather than in a 3-4 where oftentimes it's 2 offensive linemen climbing up to second level, and that creates a whole bunch of problems that way. Once again, the Guelph injury bug is, I cannot believe how bad it has been. Now, obviously, Anthony Maruso is out. Javon Jacobson is out. He literally came for the MAC game and then has been out once again for the remainder of this year. Cole Watson is out. Like, they're on their second and third string linebackers who are back there. And obviously, if you're second or third string, you're probably not the best of the best here. There's a reason why you're on the depth chart. So you're not great at handling blocks from offensive linemen. I don't care if you're 220, 230, even 240. If you're that big as a linebacker, you've got a 300-pound lineman coming at you, and he doesn't have to take your head off. All he has to do is hold you up. Anthony Miller and Quentin Springer have already showcased the fact that they can run off of blocks and set blocks up when they kind of need to and take off and do exactly what they did. And I saw from this game a multitude of different variations on that 30 front. They did that weird, I think you and I both call it the cowboy front, where it's 3 down linemen and then 2 linebackers who are like a yard off kind of thing with 1 middle linebacker in behind. They did like a mug front where all of the linebackers are up and then they come back. They blitzed a bunch, whatever, and they just could not dial something up to consistently stop the run here. Like, I think the average, we're looking at Anthony Miller's average per carry on 28 attempts. His average is 8 yards per attempt. On first down, to be in 2nd and 2 is so, like, it's unbelievably invaluable. And when you're consistently doing that, it's damn near impossible to stop. And so it doesn't really matter that you've got, my math's right, 9 guys back in potential coverage here. If you can't stop the run in the front, you're going to have a bad day.
Most certainly. And, what I love the most about Waterloo is, obviously, I'm sure there's some guys that, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that I'm not thinking of where I could be wrong in saying this, but overall, it feels like a very similar team to who they had last year. Though obviously we saw them kind of roll with Caban at QB, and we saw how he got the production, but at the expense of turning the ball over a lot, and that kind of bared out in their first game against Ottawa, a game that they were very much in until the very end of it. And obviously Quentin Springer's a rookie, so that's bolstered their running game, but Anthony Miller's been there, where it just feels like they made the move to go to Nick Orr, recognizing that, hey, like, no matter how good that upside is of when Caban, we're giving him a lot of looks, he's ultimately perhaps hurting us more than he's helping with those yards. And not to say that Caban can't just be in there handing it off as much as Nick Orr is. They very much are saying, because we talk a lot about how, statistics at the end of the game can be a product of the flow of the game, right? That when, you're coming from behind a lot, that maybe you have those inflated passing stats, or that like when you're up big, you're running a lot to kind of chew the clock out and everything like that. We're still talking about a Waterloo team that right now they're sitting at 2-3, and, a team that just, no matter what, is so committed to running the ball, recognizing that. And it kind of goes back to some other commentary we've had about, well, frankly, teams on the other side of the ledger, teams that are winning more than losing. And of course, with Waterloo, they're a game behind 500 right now. Like, this is spectacular. This game flipped every thought I had about what the playoff picture was going to look like on its head. But we normally talk about teams where it's like, you know what? Look for, develop this thing, or what are you really good at, and all these types of things, and versus a team that's going to say, like, pull all the stops to, we need to win games and all this stuff. And Waterloo's just commitment on the offensive front to run the ball. It's obviously perhaps no surprise when you think about, Coach Burt being, the offensive lineman at heart and offensive line coach and everything like that. And of course the pieces that they have. It's just, it's so great. It's so great to see. And what you love too is that bounce back coming off the bye week that, they obviously get their, they get their lunch handed to them in the Battle of Waterloo, in the week prior. And then before that, the game against Windsor, there was a lot of things we liked, but it's a 37-0 game. And once again, we talk about Coach Patask as being that culture setter, or however you want to frame it. And Bert's cut from the exact same cloth, though perhaps with a slightly more intensity to him. But it's a great statement for kind of where this team is at. And of course, shout out to Cole Crossett hitting that game winner. And you can just see how thrilled they all were. Yeah, game winner. Definitely a game winner, though not buzzer beater in the same fashion. But just there's obviously a lot more to get to and some things on the Guelph side. But man, just so happy for Waterloo picking that up. And we talk about playoff contention. This, once again, flips every thought I had about what the playoff picture was looking like on its head, and makes Waterloo a completely viable option to not sneak into the playoffs, but be there.
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this Waterloo offense, regardless of what you want to say, when you look at it, Nick Orr goes 5 for 15, 103 yards and a touchdown. They had a total of 15 passing attempts to 50 rushing attempts. And obviously they got exactly what they wanted, finishing with 361 total rushing yards on the ground against these Guelph Griffins here. But I like the play from Anthony Miller and from Quentin Springer. Like I really liked what I saw from the offensive line, like doing their thing against Guelph. Now, obviously, a 30 front, whatever, but like the players that Guelph has on the defensive line are not easy bodies to move between Woodmansey, Brown, and Parchenko. And they did a pretty good job of doing that and creating some holes for their running backs. And then you look at that defense. My goodness. There's a reason why we wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Tyson Hergott. 6 total tackles and 3 sacks and a pass breakup as a defensive end. And then you've got Oleko, 9.5 tackles, a sack and a tackle for loss. Like, this defense really seemed to do some great things. And so I'm really I'm excited about this Waterloo team that has seemingly found some kind of an identity here. And I would love to see a Bertoya coach team get back into the playoffs, baby.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, and a guy like Latmore on the back end for them and safety position. And there's some really good guys. And obviously, still go, as long as you got a Hinsberger and Waterloo, your defense should be solid. You talk about the injury bug for Guelph. And obviously, we started off the season talking about the injury bug as far as that awful injury to Isaiah Smith, but predominantly the commentary has been about how said bug has bitten their defense. Of course, in this one, we've perhaps taken too long, though. Of course, the flowers are deservingly have been thrown in Waterloo's direction. The status of one Tristan Aboud. Tom, you often get some insights from folks in around the Guelph program. I'll ask you, for one, if you've heard anything about what's kept him out. On the other hand, though, like we said, the game flipped on its head in a play in which simultaneously Marshall McRae was making one of perhaps his best play in his young OUA career. And just like that, he becomes the GOAT of this one, giving the ball up and Waterloo able to go on that drive. So I mean, do you know anything about Aboud's status just from any of your insiders in the Guelph area? And much like we talked about with U of T now, where it's like we're kind of back to the drawing board perhaps with Guelph, because honestly, put away the bad taste of that fumble. McRae was wheeling and dealing. We obviously know the athleticism he has and how they've been working him in kind of as that like wildcat back for them, but slinging the ball out there. I mean, only 2 for 3, but it was pretty late that he comes in. If it isn't anything too serious to Aboud, I'm very curious to what direction they're going in now.
Most definitely. As of right now, I don't have any updates on Tristan Aboud's status, but my DMs were angry Guelph folks and angry Mac folks pretty much this entire time here. Once again, like the injury bug, like we were talking about, a quote: another Guelph game and another day of who is not in the lineup. No Javon Jacobson, no Visan Janusis. It's like a mystery each week. I'm not sure what they're doing in practice, but it's becoming a bit of drama each and every week. And even there was somebody else who also alluded to there seems to be a lot of shoulder related injuries, and maybe they're not training properly, or they're overtraining during the season, or all of these things. And now I don't want to get into speculations by any means here, because you just get into like a nasty rabbit hole of just rumors and whatever else. But it is incredibly interesting that for the past 3 years, Guelph has dealt with a ton of injuries, and a lot of them to their key players on offense and defense here. So something has to be looked at, because you get the injury bug that comes and bites maybe once, maybe twice in a 1 or 2 years kind of thing. But to have it 3 years in a row, like there's something that needs to be kind of looked at here. Certainly, I think that there's a lot of frustration as well coming from the offensive play style here for what people can see as well from this team, and there's frustrations in that. I do want to say, yes, Marshall McRae does end up fumbling it, and that leads to Waterloo doing their thing. But in my opinion, based on everything that we had saw in this game so far, I don't think this game is nearly as close without Marshall McRae going in there and doing his thing. He accounts for 2 of the touchdowns that Guelph gets in order to ultimately get ahead in this one. So it's a catch-22, certainly, that sure, he fumbles the ball and whatever, but I think he puts you in a position to win in this game.
Yeah, no doubt you're right there. I mean, here's the interesting thing, and they're going into their bye week. So hey, if you're in and around this program and you want to spill a little tea our way, would love to know what the 411, or maybe in their case it's a 911 with all the injuries they're having over there. But because on the one hand we talked about with Janusis going down against York and not really knowing the status. He's in the sling. Oh, maybe it's a little precautionary. Obviously, that game got out of hand quickly for Guelph and everything like that. Do we see him in this one and thinking okay, you got the bye the week after, so how do they weigh that into the equation? And obviously, we don't know the status of that injury, right? It could be something where, I mean, knock on wood that this isn't the case, but he could just be done, right? It could be something really bad. But we're kind of wondering, how are they thinking about this Waterloo team? In terms of, well, can we take them out without our top receiver in tow? Are we our run game? Donovan Malloy has been killing it all year long. Tristan Aboud is really getting hot. We got young guys like Willem Arsenault really taking off as a rookie in the receiving core. Obviously, some vets like Ogilvy and Stevenson in there as well. Maybe and of course the Marshall McRae factor. Maybe they're thinking, what, we can win this without him. And then part of my thinking as well is that with Tristan Aboud is now when he goes out in this game, and once again, we don't know the status of it. On the one hand, if this is the game, let's flip the script. If this is the game against York and they got the bye week next week and Aboud, maybe on a fall through on a pass, his hand hits a helmet, and they're like, you know what, X-rays are negative, but like we're taking you out, like no doubt whatsoever, right? You can handle it, absolutely. This isn't the game where you can be saying that with your QB1. In saying that, like, well, you know what, we'll still get the job done. You're already down Janusis. You made that decision, or the injury was bad enough that he couldn't play. With the Tristan Aboud situation, it's clearly serious enough that he was legitimately pulled from this game. Now, once again, knock on wood, that it's nothing serious in terms of the long haul of their season. But here's the other piece of it. And the last thing I'll say before passing it back to you is that not that I don't think that McRae is a formidable QB1, and obviously if Janusis is back, it's that much more formidable. But you think about the totality of this offense, the way Aboud was slinging it, and then when they can go to McRae as this, like, you know, as their off-speed pitch and be able to, like, you know, try a knuckleball out, and like, what are we doing now? You know, you have so many variables. So now to be able to kind of lock in a bit more in terms of what they're doing offensively with these injuries. We obviously talked about the injuries on the defensive side of the ball. If you're Guelph, having still Queens and the running attack that they bring must scare the crap out of you down the home stretch, and then dropping this game and talking about how Waterloo's now brought themselves back into the playoff mix. Guelph is now a team where all of a sudden they went from, like, a week ago us being like, you are a lock-in, you know, you're fighting for home field advantage in the playoffs, you're one of the hottest teams out there on both sides of the ball, maybe you're getting a little healthy. All of a sudden, hey, they must be thanking their lucky stars they're on the bye week to hopefully settle some of these things out, because they absolutely need it.
Most definitely. I don't think there's a team in the entire youth sports that could use a bye week like Guelph could right now to try to get a few folks back in some key areas here. And like this entire bye week, you do walk through. You don't hit at all. You just do walk through, just helmets and shorts, and that's it. But yeah, there's so many different variables here, and it really seems like we've got, call it like the top 3 teams and the bottom like 2 teams, quite honestly, that we're now starting to realize this is going to be the season. And everybody else, it really just seems is taking their turns in terms of showcasing why they should be a part of that upper echelon, and then showcasing why they might belong a little bit closer to the bottom. And it's just so difficult in order for us to try to weed that out, kind of thing. So I am very interested to see how this Guelph team bounces back, because their last 2 games against Queens and against Carleton are going to be 2 massive games for them, where they could go from still owning their destiny and potentially having a home playoff game to missing out on the playoffs if everything goes wrong for them in the last 2 weeks here. So yeah, there needs to be a very serious look in the mirror kind of thing, and realize we need to stay consistent with some of the things that we've kind of seen throughout the season here, and showcase the fact that we deserve to be in the playoffs where anything can happen. Even if you limp in at 4-4 or whatever, you're still in the playoffs. You can still make a run for it. So yeah, we were very bullish on this team here, where I felt very, I felt justified in that based on everything that we had seen from the past couple of weeks. But man, talk about a massive victory for these Waterloo Warriors, and Guelph, the remaining part of your season just got a whole lot tougher.
Yeah, it was already tough, but they lost that little cushion, right? That's it. And they got a super physical game coming up with Queens after the bye too. So it'll be interesting to see what decisions that they're going to make. But speaking of those Queens Golden Gales, let's go to their ball game. And you know, you said something in there in sort of your last commentary of how the way the season's shaken out, we do kind of have we have kind of going back to our tiers, we kind of have that top tier of Western, Laurier, Windsor, Queens kind of knocking on the door. When you really do look at it, you look at the injury bug, you look at them being in that game against Laurier and against Western, obviously 2 games that they could have won. And then like a whole bunch of teams kind of in that 2-3, 3-2 mix. And of course, those 2 teams sitting out, it's York and it's your McMaster Marauders, if I understand correctly what you were implying there.
You're damn right.
And obviously, we're about to talk about this Queens York game. It's worth noting that, of course, Tom, your Marauders' only win was a 71-0 win over the York. Like, I call them the York Fighting Lions, like to kind of poke fun at them, I guess. I'm just dropping that at this point to the York Lions, where it's the Billy Bean line from Moneyball, where it's like you got good teams, you got bad teams. I don't want to say the rest of the quote because it is kind of mean. And once again, but then you go a bit down further and then you get to York, because the final score in this one, the Queens Golden Gales 87, the York Lions 0. Tom, I'm going to talk a little bit, if you have any inclination to adding up the amount of points. I mean, I guess we can just do points given up in total by York on the year. But the number of 80 burgers they've given up now, is that 3, 1 additional 70 burger?
Yeah. I saw this actually on Twitter earlier today. I believe the tallied mark as it stands right now is 434 points York has given up so far this season.
Like, this is obviously a certain level hyperbolic, but I'm kind of like, my stomach's kind of upset. Like, it kind of makes me a little sick. And I don't mean that once again towards any of these players, but what the hell are we doing, York? This is the worst football team. No, sorry, I will say the worst football program. They don't even deserve to be considered a football program. And once again, there's not a statement about the individuals taking the field and putting on those colors and putting on that emblem week in, week out. Like, God bless these kids for, wanting to live out their football dreams and sticking with the team. This is such, and we think about the things that we do, Tom, the things we try and do and build up OUA football. This program is a fucking indictment of this whole league. Like,
yeah,
I know that Barstool and some other things were sharing the video that Deshaun made at Persevere of the game-winning Savon Magne-Jones touchdown at the beginning of the year. Like, American media sites, sports media sites, were sharing Western's beatdown of York. And it validates all. And once again, I really I could not care less about what Americans think about Canadian football, because they don't want to take the time to actually, and sorry, I shouldn't paint with too broad a brush, but like in the general zeitgeist, you go back to that crazy IMG Academy game against that random Toronto school a couple years ago and all the commentary that followed from that. I really don't care about what the sort of mass American thought about our game is. We know that our game is great. We know that our players are great. But then it's stuff like this where it's like, man.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, I know as an OUA fan, first and foremost, you and I are getting frustrated by this. And I don't know, like, there's obviously a lot of issues with this York team, and there's a lot of things going wrong for them. And I think there is so much. I don't know if they have the right people in place from a coaching standpoint here. And quite honestly, like, maybe it's I'm deranged or I'm whatever. I've legitimately thought about this in terms of a daydream. Oh, it'd be nice to be coaching football again, whatever. How great would it be to say that you were the head coach that turned around the York Lions program? And when I say turned around, I mean you got them to 4-4. Like, you beat the teams that you probably should be competitive with, and maybe there's a few blow-off losses here or there. But, like, at this point, you get to 2-6, and people are carrying you off on their shoulders here if you're the York Lions. Like, I think that this is actually in my opinion, a somewhat favorable spot to potentially land as a head coach. Because if you just do the basic things, you get some key players in a few key areas, you get a couple of stars here or there who just believe in the program, believe in you kind of thing, and want to play there. And then you get back to like a 4-4 year where there's a York game and like the Red Blue Bowl is once again in highly competitive and like means something kind of thing where you're trying to get into a playoff spots or whatever else. Like, I don't think that this I don't like the overall adage of people just being like, oh, okay, well, just create two tiers and just whatever. No, get somebody in that York program as a head coach who actually knows what the hell they are doing, because they obviously they didn't have it last year or the previous 15 years when Craney was in there. You can't even really say about anything right now because they have two interim head coaches here, and they only announced that they had these two interim head coaches like 3 weeks before the actual season started. So you're not even setting things up to be like successful in that regard. You're trying to recruit kids when you don't have a clear head person in charge. Like, I just think you need the right kind of people in there as the coaching staff, and then you can build out around it. And I don't want to like this program has already been through enough hell. I don't want to continuously add on to it, but I don't think that this program is just, oh, it can never come back. You get a few key players who believe in the program, who want to really change something about a culture, and you can do anything in this league. We've seen time and time again. Sure, the top spot might be secured, and for the longest time, the bottom spot has been secured by these York Lions, but in the middle, we constantly see teams go up and down and up and down. If you have the right people in place, I think that York could be there. It's going to take an enormous amount of work and a lot of kids who believe in trying to change a culture. Certainly, it's a huge ask. I don't think it's outside of the realms of possibility here. I know that we're supposed to be talking about this game as a whole, and this is kind of York in general, but those are my 2 cents.
No, it's a great point. And like to the other, like to the aspect of it being a perhaps vaunted position to be able to get, you have one of the best stadiums in the whole, like, I know we've talked about like kind of fun programming we can do. And one of the things I've loved to perhaps try and brainstorm is like OUA trades. Can we just trade York Stadium to Laurier? Because they deserve to have that facility. You know what I mean?
No kidding.
Like, and you know what, Laurier, you already take all the great football players out of Toronto anyway that York's been incompetent of holding in their own backyard for the last 10 years anyway, so you might as well take their stadium while you're at it. And we haven't even talked about Queens yet. Hey, the commentary will be fairly brief in there because they were playing York, so whatever. I mean, hey, the quarterback question, we'll get to that. And normally we just don't even talk about York often. We just don't, like, because you said it last time. If you don't have something nice to say, why say it at all? But it's just like, I am fed up. I am fed up. Like I don't know what to do. But like, because you're completely right. It's, you have a great facility. Everyone wants to talk about the cost of Toronto. Honestly, I'm starting like, you have to be at Toronto, all these things. Like, it's expensive everywhere at this point, right? If York's a great university, and if there's a program there that you want to take, they have the TTC, the subway now extending all the way out there so you can get downtown. You have an inner city rivalry with the Blues, like the Battle of Waterloo, like the Panda game, right? Like these matchups that just have that built-in infrastructure and geographic proximity that make them intense and all these things. There's no, it's a tall task, but you bring the right person in, and I do believe you can do it. And I think it is an absolute failure and a mismanagement's not even the right word, of just like at the level of like athletic director, of being like, you know what, take the lion off of their logo. It should just be a white flag. Because that's what they are. And that's the signal I think that what the program gives them. It's just the York white flags.
Yeah. I mean, everything that we've kind of seen this year, it's been a lot of that. And it's been a lot of, let's not pile on to obviously the struggles and everything that they have here. But like, No, I I think your in mind frustration with our own programs here is because as alumni we expect more. Now I think it's a little bit different because you and I both came from championship winning programs and like to think that we kind of set a bar and whatever else. I don't want to get down to talking about us, but I think that's where this kind of thing needs to come into play. I think right now, no one has any expectations of the York Lions. If anything, they expect them to continue losing, and so much so that we should just create a whole other tier and put them down there and whatever else. No, this is an OUA school. Hold them to the high standard that the OUA has, and get some real bodies in there who care about the game, who want to own this program and want to bring it back. Like we have said so many times, if you do nothing else but own the Toronto area, 5-3 team. Immediately 5-3 at least, with all of the talent that comes out of Toronto. If you get a unbelievable recruiting coordinator and a head coach who cares about the game, who wants to make sure that you can, set these kids up for success and all of that, I think it'd be really like, it's not like you're trying to completely change a team that's like out in like Thunder Bay area. And I don't know what football's like in Thunder Bay, but I would just imagine that because there's not a ton of people, you probably don't get the best of the best up there. You're in Toronto. You have so many amazing players surrounding you each and every single year. Own your city and you're good to go. I want to hold these York Lions to a higher standard here. I don't want to just put them to the wayside anymore. Like, let's get some people in place here who care about the game, even a fraction of as much as you and I, and let's see some life out of these York Lions. You've got guys like Melkus Alunga, who is a phenomenal running back and legitimately could do a lot of great things, and I'm sure there's more on that team. Like, let's see something. Let's hold this team to a higher standard and say, hey, you know what? Announcing your 2 interim head coaches 3 weeks before a season is not okay. It's not acceptable. Hey, not having a proper recruiting plan for presumably this entire offseason because you were trying to find a replacement for Craney, not acceptable. Hold that athletic director, hold this program to a higher standard here, and get these damn York Lions back on track.
Amen. And he said Melkus Alunga, Avante McCoy, Retson Daly. That's like, I think they're all around like the same year. Like, that's a core of skill position guys that, save for the best of the best, pretty much every team in the OUA would love to have 2 of those 3 on their team and be able to say, like, we can build something around this. But all right, hey, for Queens, the question mark coming in this one, right, was Vrikin breaks the non-throwing hand or something in the arm, and just kind of that whole thing of like, well, he's not back at this point, right? And we don't even see Russell Weir in this one. It's Anthony Leo. Maybe it's just for the poetry of you're playing the Lions, so throw in Leo the Lion. Who knows? He goes 14 for 18, 2 touchdowns. I don't really know what to make of it. Jared Kasari, you already said it, the 286 yards on the ground, the 5 touchdowns. Anthony Souls adds in 2 touchdowns as well. They get 4 interceptions. I mean, it's a great stat padding day for them. At the end of the day, Tom, I guess we're now, just over 2 weeks from that Western game where Vrikin goes down. So I'll go back to the commentary that we mentioned. I think going into week 6 of being like, okay, so he's clearly, he can't play until that non-throwing arm is healed up. So don't know what kind of break it is, but at this point for Queens, let's see where we're at right now. They host Carleton. They're on the road for Guelph. They host Ottawa. And you know what? Frankly, despite some of the consternation we felt about this team, I mean, at the end of the day, they are pretty well in control of their fate. There is a very, reasonable recipe for them ending up 5-3 actually still. But the question is though, like, I mean, hey, like, Carleton, we'll obviously talk about them shortly. That'll be interesting to see how Carleton's defense holds up against the Kasari and the Souls running attack of Queens, and if they can win, and if Queens can win that on the back of that. We know their defense can certainly stifle Carleton's passing attack, or at least do so in large measure. They play Guelph, where hey, like it's going to be interesting depending on who's maybe still out for Guelph to just see if they can maybe surpass the rushing effort that Windsor put up on them, or at least somewhere between the Windsor and the Waterloo effort on it. And then you end up with Ottawa. And that game is very fascinating if they don't have Vreeken back in that one, because that's a defense that I think can even stifle their running game a little bit. And then offensively, with the way that they run it with Polk in Ottawa there, that game is going to be fascinating. We obviously highlighted that Week 9 matchup going back to our preseason tier pods. So for Queens, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Vreeken back till the playoffs. I really don't know what to make of their season the rest of the way out. If they just want to rely on the run game, I'm pretty confident they can pick up the win at Guelph. Carleton, I think so, because I think that defense, and it's that Ottawa game. So it'll be a fascinating end of the season, whether it's based on this game or kind of the state of Queens, knowing that Vreeken's obviously out for some period of time now. Where are your feelings about this club?
It's funny because you and I were talking about it right before the podcast started. It's hilarious to think that this Queens team, has a very real possibility of finishing 5-3 this year. And this is still the season from hell for this squad to deal with. The amount of injuries that has been going on here. And, we kind of got called out by a fan as well, by not detailing how many injuries this Queens team has kind of dealt with here. Obviously, you've got Alex Vreeken that's out. Yan Longa transfers out after the program. They have a bunch of key people who are down for a couple of games in that. Silas Hubert has yet to make his OUA appearance this season. Like, there's a lot of key players that were out in a lot of key games or so far this season. And they lose a few games that they really had the opportunity to win, or we thought that they could have won, but they just didn't. They didn't come up with that same magic that they'd had for the past couple of seasons here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the injuries that they've been dealing with, and obviously the great play on the other side of the ball as well. I don't want to take away anything from the teams that were able to beat this Queens team, because for whatever you want to say about the offense, and obviously dealing with Vreeken being down and whatever else, this Queens defense I still think is legit. I think this is a very solid Queens D, and we're just seeing the result of a lot of unfortunate breaks for these guys.
And of course, those 3 losses for them are, of course, at the hand of the 3 teams that have very well set themselves above the pack. And, so let's put that game aside and get to the first matchup we have had all season between 2 of those teams. And it lived up to the billing from whistle to whistle, from the start of the first quarter to the end of the fourth, and every single moment in between. It's the Western Mustangs taking out the Windsor Lancers in Windsor. Final score in this game, Western 21, Windsor 10. For those tuning in on YouTube for the feed, just as always, when you think I'm wearing Western gear, just look a little closer. It's junior Mustang gear, so let's just get that straight. But of course, Western is deserving of credit for this game, picking up as all the commentary both that you and I had made, and then just folks on Twitter in general were highlighting of how this was going to be such a physical game, and it certainly looked like it. And let's start off with you, Mr. Tom, because as we posted onto our Twitter, you looked into your, into your crystal ball. We did, Tom Stradamus, and seeing that this was going to be the second time Keon gets held under 100 yards, and that Windsor defense came through in droves. What did you like from the way that Windsor attacked this Western offense, and how Western was still able to chunk the ball downfield to get their points?
The one thing that we kind of gone back and forth about, the offense might do this, the run game might do this for this Windsor team, but what is that defense like? Obviously, they've been playing really solid so far. Is this the real deal? I can tell you, yes, this Windsor defense is for real. They played unbelievably throughout this entire game and needed a little bit more help from that that offense from Windsor, certainly, but to Windsor's offense's credit, they're going up against the number two, number one, depending on how you want to chop it up, defense in Western as well. This was two teams, just a defensive struggle, which may not be the most flashy or entertaining, whatever. But man, as a lover of football, holy crap, did I love everything to go along with this game. The amount of times that you saw phenomenal defensive line play for both of these squads here. Mufta Ageli doing his thing, Kaladia Musin, like that entire Windsor D line just creating havoc for that Western offense. And the same thing on the other side of things. You saw the Van Mueldorfer, and like it was just so fantastic to see the line play here. Obviously, as two offensive linemen talking about this as well. But man, like you really saw some phenomenal fight from these Windsor Lancers here, not backing down from the challenge that is the Western Mustangs, and really in a lot of places seemingly outplaying them in certain areas, like forcing Western to go. I don't know the stats off the top of my head here, but I think that was the most I've ever seen Western go for 2 and outs in this game. Like it was really, really impressive, everything that I saw here. Now, obviously, you know, you need to follow that up with some success on offense as well, which Windsor really struggled with. But like you said, like it was at halftime, Windsor's winning this game. Like it seems like, hey, if they can just hold on here, if they can just hold off, even if the offense struggles, if they can just hold on, they have a chance. But the beauty of that Western offense is they just wear you down and wear you down and wear you down. And then finally, Evan finds Seth Robertson for a 30-yard touchdown. And that ultimately spells the game. Obviously, a couple of Brian Garrity field goals to really punch that one home, but 13 points in the fourth quarter, and that's enough to put Western over the edge here.
Yeah. And you talk about the line play, and, you know, hey, it's take a drink when the At the 55 crew talk about an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, and specifically take 2 if we mention Eric Anderson's name, because I'm going to mention him again. Honestly, like, even if you do not, like when I watch football, I kind of just like on the snap, I kind of just vaguely just center my eyes around where the center is. I don't lock into anything in particular. I kind of want to see if I can see as much as I can in particular. But like, honestly, do yourself a favor. The next Western game, just watch 61. Oh my goodness. Because the funny thing too is that Eric's one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. Classic offensive lineman in that regard. And I think even more so with this game, he was playing like just the way he was mauling some of the guys. Like when he was up to the second level, he was playing like he was pissed off. Like he thought that kind of that commentary that we were having about like, okay, Windsor's getting, you know, the kind of doing the Icarus thing, and they flying too close to the sun, or whichever piece of Greek mythology that is. But you mentioned Windsor getting up early in this one, and of course Javoni Cunningham, you know, man oh man, like if the OUA is going to do some kind of like plays of the year type top 10, top 5 thing at the end of the year, and if they don't, we should certainly rack our brains to put together some kind of a list like that and try and compile the plays ourselves. Certainly put himself in contention for said play with that punt return touchdown. The thing though I'm so interested about though is that you mentioned that it's 13 points in the fourth quarter for Western. They shut out Windsor, and it's that touchdown to Seth Robertson, the 2 Garrity field goals. Now we talked about that. Joey Zorn missed the game against Queens. He's out in this one. What I find kind of curious is that, you know, so Windsor's up, and yet at the end of the day, Danny Skelton, then, you know, he's playing. Hey, he's played the 2 best defenses he's faced all year, and it ain't gonna get too much easier with Laurier coming up soon. But he was 18 for 35, 237, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, both to Jackson Finley. Shout out to Jackson Finley. I think he picks a sack up as well. And so what I'm curious about is that, sure, they're missing Joey Zorn, but they only run Christopher John 12 times. They give Waby Mambo 5 carries. They give Talbot 2 carries of his own in the mix as well. And part of my thinking, you know, we talk about how so often a team's philosophy on offense is predicated upon sort of game score situation. they were certainly, like when we talked about how Ottawa came back on them and how that's a hard team to come back on, because if they get up on you, they can just run the ball and just pick up first down after first down after first down, march the field. And even if they settle to have to punt it or kick a field goal, they're maybe flipping the field, picking up points, if not the full 7. I'm kind of baffled by how much they went to Danny Skelton. And I don't take back where we kind of ranked him in the top, kind of 5, top 4 of OUA quarterbacks. But we know what a load Christopher John is and just how explosive Waby Mambo and Liam Talbot are to the outside. How did you feel about the way that they were moving the ball offensively, particularly in the second half where they have a lead, they end up getting shut out, but at the end of the day, name of the game is just be up when the final, when the final buzzer sounds. And the last thing I'll say super quick, Western ends up with 3 more minutes of time of possession. I did not think that was what was going to transpire in this one. So from that aspect, how did you feel about the way that Windsor was moving the ball, particularly in the second half?
Yeah, most definitely. It's certainly worth talking about. But you look at this Western team, you're not going to beat them. You're not going to beat a Western squad running the ball 50 times in a game. Certainly, they could have run it more often. And I completely hear everything that you're saying. Christopher John is a load, and even 12 attempts, he gets 74 yards, and I guarantee each and every single yard that he got, he was carrying Western Mustangs along with him as he was rolling. But ultimately, at the end of the day, against these top-tier teams that Windsor is going to continue to face in Western, in Windsor, or sorry, not in Windsor, in Western and in Laurier, if you want to win, you have to see some production from your quarterback. You have to. And I think Danny Skelton, while I still do think that he is in that top 5, like we were saying, this is now like when he plays against this Western team, this is 100% on him in terms of the offensive production from the air. Now, what I mean by that is in every other game so far, Windsor's defense has had a takeaway, at least 1 or 2. And so you get that momentum to go along with that. And then suddenly you're able to make a couple of key passes because you've got that momentum. You got these teams on their heels and you're getting a touchdown pass. And I don't want to say that that's the only reason why Danny Skelton has had success, because it's not true. Danny is a great quarterback and he deserves the accolades here. But now you're going up against another Western team that, like I said on the preview pod, does not make a lot of mistakes. And the mistakes that they do make, it's not like we just threw an incredible interception or whatever else. It's the standard, like, hey, maybe you stepped incorrectly here, maybe there's a missed block here or there, whatever, but not game-ending mistakes. So are you able to beat them head up, essentially, limiting the mistakes that you make yourself, along with making a lot of key plays here? Because realistically, that's the way that you have to beat this Western team. That's been the standard for a very long time now. You can't rely on their mistakes. You have to go out and create your own opportunities against this team. And being this the first time that Danny's really put in that scenario where you have to go out and create this opportunity against a very good Western squad, who now after this game is the number 1 team in the OUA at getting takeaways. That's not an easy thing to do. And obviously he struggled in that.
You're absolutely right. And I think despite so many similarities between these clubs this year, and you've been leading this parade of saying how this year Western's setting up their run with their pass, or at the very least, they're leaning into being pass first. That Evan is the engine that drives this machine forward, or what have you. I think for Skelton, and maybe and don't know his eligibility off the top of my head, but if he's back there next year again, maybe they can flip it a little bit. I think for him, and I love the skill guys he has at receiver. Guys like Cunningham, Jin, Thrasher, Johnson, Talbot, like all these guys out there that can catch balls for him. But I think he needs the run game to be going a little bit more than, say, Evan Hillock does to get his offensive production in the air going. And hey, like he's not Evan Hillock. Like we know that for sure. And that's not a shot at him. There's there is only one Evan Hillock, and he plays for Western, unfortunately, for everyone else in the OUA. But, speaking of Evan, because I think for a lot of people, if you're just looking at the numbers, and we've gotten used to looking at Claudia Musin's numbers at the end of the games, and he's got 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, right, a couple other tackles, right, and same thing you mentioned with Mufta. And just on the stat sheet, they are a bit quieter than what we've come to expect. But if you want the stat based way of understanding, once again going back to just still how dominant that defensive front for Western is. Yes, we can look at Keon Edwards being held to 80 yards on the ground, but I want to draw your eyes to Evan Hillock with 5 attempts rushing for 21 yards, because newsflash, they didn't draw those up. That was Mr. Hillock running for his life and managing to pick up those yards, scampering around to evade the likes of a Musin and a Gelly and all these other guys. And we talked about Ethan John coming off the Queens game and just how electric he was, and he backs that performance up with another great outing today. So from the defensive standpoint for Windsor, you're solid. That is foundational, and I think it'll be fascinating to see how they do against Laurier, particularly with the way we talk about Western attacking through the air. Laurier certainly loves taking those big shots downfield, and just how effective Varisik and John and some of these guys in the secondary for Windsor will hold up against that. But it is stamped, it is patent approved. This Windsor defense, as you said off the jump, they are phenomenal. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's now about them getting healthy, getting Zorn back into that, into that backfield to really round out all the various skill sets they bring. I mean, he's one of the best runners we have in the game. That's a tough thing to be able to do. As you said, yeah, you're rarely going to beat a Western team running it 50 times. Well, if a team were to ever do that, it would probably have Joey Zorn in it, along with the Christopher Johns and the Wavy Mambos and Liam Talbots of the world. So I think if you're Windsor, it sucks. It looked like an electric atmosphere. I can't wait to see more of the comments coming from people that we know kind of in the Twitter sphere and whatnot, who were there kind of talking about that, because it certainly, it looked electric just watching it through the stream and everything like that. At the end of the day, though, I think you're happy. I mean, with Windsor, you want to pick up the win, but I think you walk away with this being happy with the outcome. A lot of positives there for you, especially when you're down your best offensive player. For Western, Tom, I imagine my thought is you're pretty happy picking up this win as well. Obviously solidifying yourself as that top dog. You still got Laurier on your schedule for the last week of the season, and depending on how the Laurier-Windsor game goes prior to that week 9 matchup, it'll be interesting to see what Western's philosophy is in that one, because let me paint you a scenario. If Windsor takes out Laurier, and then maybe that doesn't quite secure Western with the first overall seed, even if they lose to Laurier, because then we maybe get into that tiebreak scenario where Laurier beats Western beats Windsor. But there is a situation where you could see, particularly if Laurier picks up a loss before that week 9 matchup, where Western might be kind of looking to just glide into the playoffs with a bit of an extra bye week. But on the whole, I have to imagine you think Western's pretty happy coming off of this loss, or probably off of this win.
Yeah, most definitely. Western has taken care of business, and they've gotten through that gauntlet of travel. That's the thing that Jack brought up as well going into this. They went into Queens, they went into Windsor, they've done all of the travel that's kind of been required of them this past year, and they're out of it now. They finish up with, I think there's just as an aside, there's 3 teams that are on a bye.
Yeah, because we only have 4 games on the Thanksgiving weekend
for Thanksgiving, which that's the shout out to the OUA schedules for that. Having 3 teams being off so that they can celebrate with their family on Thanksgiving. I'm a fan of that. Anyways, but now Western, you're at home against Toronto and you're at home against Laurier. Now Laurier, I think, is going to give them the strongest matchup of the entire year so far, but you're at home for it. You went on the road and you got the job done throughout the entire year. And if you handle your cards right, at least until the Yates Cup, you could be at home for the majority of the remainder of this season.
It's a great point. I agree about Laurie giving them that fight, and yeah, no, I honestly, it's funny where I just feel like for Western, I like this has been, I think, a great season for them. I mean, they're sitting at 6-0. Of course, it's been a great season for them, but I just feel like they've been in some competitive games. And yeah, sure, there's something to be said about when you go through your regular season dominating every team week in, week out. Well, then clearly, what does it even matter what happens in the playoffs? You've established yourself as being that much better than everyone else. But I just think the multitude of ways they've had to adapt. We talk about how when they get to a national semifinal or to the Vanier, maybe they face some adversity and they're caught off guard from going through the OUA regular season like a hot knife through butter. They've had their back up against the wall in a couple of games. They've had to face that adversity. And in many ways, though, it's not as explosive a Western season just from like the outcomes and all these in every single game. I actually think that in some ways, and we'll still see how that Laurier game plays out, this Western team seems so dangerous, despite so many questions we had about them, and in some regards still have about them when they face a particularly strong front seven defensively. But yeah, Western obviously going on to their bye before, as you said, hosting U of T and Laurier to round out the season. Windsor also on the bye before they go to Laurier and then finish at home against York. I actually really don't like, I think I mentioned it before, how Windsor's season wraps up. Maybe in a way it's a good thing because they won't get that first week bye, so they can just take the York game off or whatever. But let's go into our final matchup of the weekend. And of course, it's the crown jewel of the OUA regular season. It is the Panda game, Panda 2023. We joke about when you bet against your own team, you with Mac, me with Guelph, you get to win either way because either your team comes up victorious or you're right on the pick. And though, as I said, I think this is perhaps the worst outcome of picks I've ever had in my 5 years of picking games in the OUA. I think I picked against Ottawa for all the right reasons going into this one, but I do not give a darn because that was sweet to see Campbell Fair kick this one into the W column for Ottawa. Here's where I want to set you up, though, Tom, because part of the reason that I think we thought that Carleton had the advantage in this one is because we've seen Tristan Lefebvre have such a great year throwing the ball. All these guys like Hatchie and Reddy, and of course Ferdinand, who's having such a great season. Kasim Ferdinand, that is, of course. And just that with Ottawa's defense being banged up, and I do think Harnour is out for the season now, unfortunately, but still banged up with some of their other guys. One of the Cumberbatch brothers and Crookshank and Victome being a little banged up. The way that Carleton's passing the ball in offense, the way Ottawa's defense is banged up, might spell trouble. And with Ottawa being down to their third QB, and we really liked him, and frankly, I liked a lot of things we saw from him in this game, Mr. Josh Jansen, ultimately, they run the ball with the best of them, quite literally the best of the best in Amilcar Polk. And so just if Carleton's offense is humming, if they're passing it downfield, Lefebvre's finding his boys, they're finding the end zone. If you're trying to, make your money on the ground, if you're Ottawa, it might just be a factor where at the end of the day, we run out of time. What was so fascinating, and you could tell, I could tell watching this game, or it felt like it watching this game, but the box score validates this, is that when it was all said and done, Ottawa actually outpasses, or as far as attempts, and it's only by one, but because of the narrative we painted going into it, which I think was fair, Ottawa attempts 28 passes to Carleton's 27. And then on the flip side, though, Carleton rushes the ball 34 times to Ottawa's 22. I literally was watching this game thinking that this is the bizarro world version of everything I thought this game was going to be. And I think we had every reason for thinking the game was going to go in the way we did. How did you enjoy this Panda game? What did you think about the way that these two teams tried to move the ball? And what do you think about, our second week now of watching Mr. Josh Jansen, spin it for the Ottawa GGs?
Yeah, I loved everything that I saw from this GG squad. Right from the get-go, opening kickoff, fumble, Carleton takes over, and 3 plays later, they're up 7-0. And immediately afterwards, I'm in my head going, oh my God, this could be really bad for Ottawa. Because, like we were talking about here, on paper, Carleton is a much stronger air raid offense or offense through the air than Ottawa would be while being on their third string quarterback. And it's a lot harder to come back in a game when you're more of a run heavy team rather than a pass heavy team. And I thought, if Carleton is able to get up 14-0 here, that might be the game, blah, blah, blah. But Ottawa comes to play. And despite all of the injuries that they've seen on offense and defense this year, that defense comes out and they hold them. And then Ottawa is able to get back onto the board. And with a Canberra Rouge, it's 8-7. And then ultimately scoring once again inside to start into the beginning of, or in that third quarter. So it's 15-7. And I'm looking around like, oh my God, this Ottawa team, like, where is this coming from? You guys seem to be so much more legit. You have so much more chemistry on this team, where it really, from the outside looking in, once again, seems like the only major change that they made was putting Jansen in and taking Lacandro out. And it seems like this offense suddenly has some life again. Now, obviously, Maxim Malafont, Noah Avery, those guys do great, but Nicholas Gendron, oh my goodness, 4 catches and for 121 yards. Like, this dude was phenomenal for them. So I'm really interested to see where this Ottawa GG team is going to land going into the latter part of the season and getting into the playoffs here, because quite honestly, and GG fans, I'm very sorry, I had written off this team going into this game. I thought, you know what, they're going to lose this game. They've got a hell of a tough season remaining, and while they're going to pick up a couple of wins here, ultimately, like, I don't know what the future's going to be like. With this Panda win, that you own your destiny. You completely own it. The sky is the ceiling for these guys. Now, obviously, they're not getting a first-round bye or anything like that, but you now enter into the possibility of hosting a playoff game at TD Place once again. And if you can get a fraction of the fans that you got out for the Panda game, that's massive home field advantage.
No doubt. First of all, on behalf of all GG's fans, as their spokesperson, I will say that we will forgive you. So you're welcome. What's so fascinating, and as GG's fan number one over here, the thing that is still kind of disconcerting from this game, though, is that despite how we talked about Carleton wanting to move the ball in the air and everything like that, and that they kind of went away from it, it wasn't necessarily to their, well, I mean, they lose, so I mean, at the end of the day, like, clearly something didn't work ideally. But they ran the ball better than, like, maybe even they might have even, I'm not going to pull up the box score against York, but they might have had more rushing yards on the ground than they even did in that game. They were, I think, I was looking at it earlier, 90 yards above their average. And yeah, so we're down Harnour in the defense. I didn't see Cruikshank out there again with them, more as secondary players. But once again, going back to the Windsor game for Ottawa, it was rather formidable how they were able to slow down that rushing attack. And so it's definitely you're a little uneasy seeing Carleton, what was it, like 220 yards on the ground rushing. They've obviously found a bit of this mojo of having obviously the veteran in Joshua Ferguson, but Alex Gale being obviously their prime back there. They're able to get Kasim Ferdinand in the mix a little bit too, kind of a little like Liam Talbot-ish, the way that like Windsor likes to do their thing, with him kind of maybe some sweep jet actions and then just kind of being that gadget guy for them. So, once again, on the whole for Carleton, as we've said for a couple weeks now, I think you have a lot of positives to look forward to and into next year, where it's like, oh, this could be really fascinating for them. And I'm not freaking out over here in GG land whatsoever, but it is just, once again, a team that seemingly in the 2010s have not been able to run the ball effectively. Pretty much a team that since Nathan Carter hung up the cleats at running back for the Ravens hasn't been able to put together a good running attack, that they kind of have this this breakout affair against you. And, like I said, that's something that I do find concerning, because their next week, they're hosting Laurier. The week after that, they get Mac. The week after that, they finish on the road at Queens. And so that's where, once again, when I was kind of doing a bit of my, to once again go back to the question we raised and the Adam McGuire kind of thought about or talked about on Twitter of, can a 3-5 team sneak into the playoffs? In the kind of question, in the way I was kind of breaking that down, I'm like, hey, I'm probably going Laurier on the road against Ottawa. I'm going to give Ottawa the game against Mac, because I think we've now made an agreement to no longer ever think about or even dream about picking Mac. If I even pick them in a dream, I'll apologize to you, Tom. And really, it's now like, not that Queens wouldn't have been a formidable task, but you think, okay, if they're down their quarterback, we already know they have that running attack. Do you feel like this Ottawa Gigi's defense is, despite the injuries to more of the back end side of that defense, was this just a blip on the radar? Or, I don't know, were you seeing maybe some cracks in the armor that Carleton was taking advantage of? Because once again, this is a Carleton team we're not used to seeing run the ball overly efficiently.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to think from the Gigi side of things. If you're coming into this game, you are 100% getting prepared for the pass. 100%. You're not even thinking about the run and what else can kind of be happening here. Obviously, you and I have been very high on the potential that Josh Ferguson has, but he really hasn't been able to showcase that in the past couple of years at all. So yeah, you're completely devoted to trying to stop the pass. And because of the injuries that Ottawa is dealing with, you have to get a little creative, I'm sure, and putting people in the right spaces. So yeah, great idea for Carleton to go to the run and try and catch them off guard. And obviously they did. Alex Gale goes for 81 yards, Josh Ferguson for 75. Like, they found some success there. Now, while yes, you found some success, and credit to Carleton, obviously, I wanted to see Tristan Lefebvre get a little bit more opportunities. Now, he finishes with 26 attempts, and that's nothing to sneeze at, certainly, but 170 yards in the air. When you and I were talking about this, we were thinking like 300, maybe 350 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I saw this coming a little bit more, but obviously we didn't get a chance to see that. And I think ultimately that kind of, that almost spells out the game here, because when you're going, like, you can see, you're looking at it back and forth here in terms of the breakout for offense, like Josh Jansen, 18 for 28, 251 in the air, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Tristan Lefebvre, 19 for 26, 171 touchdown, no picks. And then even Amikar Polk, 15 attempts. Alex Gale, 14 attempts. It's very, very similar in terms of the offensive game strategy between these two. And I think going into this game, Carleton certainly had the advantage passing through the air. But when you're looking at a run, like, there's not a lot of teams I would put ahead of having an advantage over Ottawa. And so when you're in that same kind of game plan in terms of you're going run against run, yeah, the advantage goes to Ottawa. And you can see Polk, he only finishes with 83 yards here, but I don't know. I was really interested to see the change up, like you said, and I think it ultimately might have ended up hurting them. Now, obviously, they were just a 55-yard field goal away from winning this game, but still, I thought that if Carleton had changed up their offense a little bit more and focused a little bit more on the pass, I think they would have seen some more success.
First and foremost, like, I can't tell you the literal just like ease that I felt in you raising that brilliant point that, yeah, Ottawa probably was just saying, all right, hey, we invite you to run the ball. Go ahead and do it. And it may be, well, clearly based on the results as you highlighted, played into exactly what Carleton was thinking. I mean, one of the many reasons I love the sport of football, I say it to the kids I get to work with and coach with, it's literally just a giant game of chess, but where you beat the shit out of the other person as well. I'm swearing like a sailor on this podcast. My goodness. And so from that standpoint, All right, we're all good here in GG land. We got our guy Josh Jansen slinging the ball. Polk's gonna be fine. The defense is all right, even if we're down Harnour and everything like that. Hopefully, we get Crookshanks back in the mix. And I'm leaning heavily into the usage of the "we" in our conversations about them. But you know what? We talk about we talk about the idea of having Toronto football being at its apex and whatever that might be, and we always do so in thinking of hypotheticals. Just for football fans in the region of Ottawa right now, obviously I hope you were at this game because it just looked so electric. The fans, obviously with the Carleton fans storming the field right before the fair field goal. I mean, goodness gracious, can only imagine what they're feeling after that. But Ottawa football just across the board with these two programs, I think is once again, haven't gone through the archives of the last 10 years now, but I feel like these two teams are in such a formidable spot where there's so much optimism surrounding both of these clubs, and it's awesome. And obviously we know that a lot of the top talent of OUA football players, just football players in general out of Ontario, do come from the Ottawa region, and it's good that we're seeing these two teams represent it. I think last thing I'll say on this one, just kind of thinking on that theme, is obviously it was a fun broadcast to tune into on the OUA TV stream, and I don't recall the names of the commentators who do the Ravens broadcasts, and great job by both of them. We need to track down the dude who does color for them, because Buddy was just dropping in the Panda game in 1972 when all these wild stories where you can kind of tell the play-by-play guy was kind of just like, so now back to the game here. To our color guy on the call, I apologize for not knowing your name. Those stories are bread and butter for off-season content for us here. So if we can get a little story time of Panda, we'll come up with a snappy little title for it, and we'll put something together in the off-season. That would be beautiful. So just once again, my way of saying shout out to the Ottawa region football scene out there. This is the crown jewel of the OUA regular season. It lived up to the hype, and many a tears were brought to my eyes just envisioning that could be more than a once in a season occasion to have that type of output, that type of environment, if you will. Tom, last thoughts before we wrap up week 6?
You kind of nailed it there. Obviously the play on the field was phenomenal in this Panda game, and I really think that it has been for, I don't know, just this game, I just want to be able to bottle some kind of aspect of it and give it to other areas of this league, and just watching the stands and seeing people cheer and seeing people obviously get their screen time, and it was probably being showcased on the big Jumbotron and freaking out in front of it, whatever. But then a touchdown happens and you pan to the stands and everybody is losing it. They're so excited. They're so happy. And then there's a quick pan over to the other side. Carleton scores. They pan over to the Ottawa side and people are dejected, and I'm not happy because people are sad by any means, but you're following the game. You're watching what's on the field. So many times we've seen, you and I've gone to live games, and we've seen people who are, there in the first half trying to check things out, kind of on their phones, not really paying attention all that much, and then they end up leaving. These folks were in the stands the entire game, loud, cheering for their squad, so excited for everything. That is what I want OUA football to be all year round. That. And so, Panda, I am so happy that you have been back now for what is it? This is 10 years since you've been back, and came back in 2013 for this Carleton Ravens squad. I hope you never, ever go away, and you are always the thing I will most look forward to in a regular season matchup, purely because of the fan interaction that you get from there.
Shout out to Pedro the Panda. Shout out to Ottawa football. Shout out to the fans, the student sections from the Carleton Ravens and from the Ottawa GGs, making that a day to remember, no doubt, for the players and everyone involved in that one. And what a just tremendous capstone to a phenomenal weekend of OUA football, from the immense disappointment to your Marauders dropping a golly, if that were ever a must-win in Toronto, it was that one. To the Guelph Griffins getting run over by the Waterloo Warriors. To Queens, well, hey, whoever your quarterback is, didn't really matter in this one. To the matchup, the battle of the undefeateds in Western and Windsor with the Purple Ponies coming out on top. To, of course, the majesty of the Panda Game 2023 that we just broke down for you. If you weren't entertained this week 6 in the OUA, you do not like OUA football, and I would check your pulse in general to see if you have any life within you. But that will wrap it up for our week 6 review. The end of the season is coming fast. It is coming furious, and I don't know what to make of these teams anymore. We will perhaps do a little bit more prognosticating with the standings. Maybe we'll wait one more week, but hey, frankly, if we wait one more week, we're pretty well into the end of the season anyways. We got 3 more weeks until we are into the playoff action. So thank you as always for tuning in, consuming our content, however it is you are doing so. We appreciate it immensely. Keep reaching out to us however it is you've been reaching out to us. Questions, comments, suggestions, any obvious misses that we're just missing on the podcast. I appreciate seeing those. I said on Twitter, if I had $1 for every time I misspoke on this podcast, well, we might be able to fund a Panda Game type event every single week in OUA action. But nonetheless, that's our wrap for week 6. We have an incredible slate of Thanksgiving games coming up for you this weekend. So we will talk to you about all those this Thursday and much more at the 55.